Hi, everyone. This is John Daly. I'm back with a brand new episode of the Daly Express podcast. My guest today is a longtime political columnist and news media editor who's worked for the Washington Examiner, Fox Business, Red State, and the Dallas Morning News. He now works in strategic communications, and he recently revamped his Substack, the Monday Notice, which is always a good read. I'm talking about Jay Caruso. Welcome, Jay, to the Daily Express.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Sure thing, sure thing. Well, it's great to finally have you on. You actually co-hosted the first podcast I was ever on several years ago. It was a little uncomfortable for me back then, I'll be honest. That was mainly because I wasn't expecting you and Neil Dewing to record that episode shirtless, but I appreciated the experience. And that didn't actually happen.
We were trying to stand out and be different at the time, so
Yeah, that's right. Well, you got to try something. But yeah, I've been wanting to have you on this podcast for a while now, and I'm glad we finally made it happen.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, I wanted to start off by asking you about some topics you recently wrote about for the Monday Notice. One of them is something I've written a little about, how politics have to many people become their religion. Can you talk about what you mean by that?
Basically, what I mean is, I don't want it to be something that's a negative connotation towards religion. I said that and I specified that in the piece. I said I don't mean religion in the sense that it's something that you look to for spiritual meaning or for guidance or things like that, but more like the kind of fundamentalist kind of religion where everything is rigid and anything that operates outside of those boundaries is bad or wrong or evil. And I think for many people, politics has become that way. It's become somewhat of a religion for some people because they're so heavily invested in it, too much invested in it, that everything that they see, everything that they talk about has some political connotation to it. And I just think it's unhealthy. And as somebody who has worked and been around this, I mean, I've been following politics for over 30 years. One of the first elections I was really seriously following was 1992. That's how old I am. But I've been doing this professionally, writing about it now for 10 years and writing about it before that for over 20. And I've found that there's times when you just have to kind of take a clean break. You have to step away from it. There's some discipline in doing it, but everybody can. If you're just going to be tied to it all day on social media and cable news and everything else, it can become unhealthy, like any other kind of obsession. Doesn't necessarily have to be drugs or alcohol or gambling or anything like that, but it becomes a vice. And that's where it's when I say about religion, I mean where religion is more of a vice than anything else.
Yeah, no, I do. I thought it was an interesting piece. There are a lot of people who make it such a, and I believe this was your quote you did, a significant part of their identity. And
Right.
yeah, it's weird. I mean, I write about politics a lot. I do these podcasts. I'm on Twitter doing things, or X, whatever. But yeah, it's funny because I when I'm not in front of a computer, or I don't like talking about politics at all. I go out with friends and
Yeah.
they'll bring it up just because they know that I do this. But
Right.
I don't like talking about it at all. I'd rather just be away from it, unless I'm
Yeah. Well, I mean,
consciously doing
we've
it.
seen photos of you going to concerts and stuff like that, and
Right.
and and the thing is, you could easily to be what we're kind of discussing here is you could be in a situation where you go and look at the band and see what kind of politics do the band members
Yeah.
have. Did they vote for Kamala? Did they vote? But you don't care. Yeah, I several years ago, somebody was telling me, I was talking about Ben Affleck, who's a pretty strong Democratic person politically, but I also think he's a terrific director. Movies like The Town and other things that he's directed are fantastic. And I was stating that I'm still going to see his movies. I don't care about his politics. And somebody accused me of saying, well, by default, you're basically funded by giving money to him, by going to his movies. You're by default or de facto donating to the Democratic Party. And I can't wrap my head around that kind of thing. That's like a level of inception I can't get to. And I'm not
It,
sitting
it,
here thinking about where is Ben Affleck's dollars going when I go see, I go to see a movie of his that he directed.
Yeah, it's wild. It's because I mean, just like if I had to only appreciate, for example, movies and music from people who are politically aligned with me, which is practically nobody these days. But if we go back to sort of the pre-Trump era, I would have had to just listen to country all the time because I hate country. So yeah, I never understood this idea that they have to be on your team. An entertainer or an artist has to be
Right,
on your political team in order for you to appreciate what they're about.
right.
So yeah, and one of the
It's
part.
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say one of the a line from your column too that I had been thinking about as well was you said when I see somebody say they want you dead, whether on the left or the right, I think to myself, what is going on in this person's head? And I totally agree with that. I see that all the time online where like people are convinced now that the other side wants them dead.
Right.
And I mean we have these terrible, incidents that have happened, the Charlie Kirk thing, but it's people have sort of taken that and put that onto like their neighbors. They're worried that their neighbors,
Right.
want them dead. It's go ahead. Yeah.
Right. But that's why they reverted to using the term they.
Mhm.
They killed Charlie Kirk. They tried to kill President Trump because it's so much better when you can kind of wrap it around an entire movement rather than to people that were clearly had mental issues. So it's very easy to do that, and we saw that. Gosh, we saw that back in 2011 with the shooting of Gabby Giffords. It was Sarah Palin's targets on congressional districts that did it, and then it turned out that the guy was very mentally disturbed and had an obsession with her. It had nothing to do with Sarah Palin or districts or anything like that. So that becomes unhealthy. Again, it's an unhealthy reaction to it. Is it terrible that Charlie Kirk was shot and killed? Yes, it was, because it was done in public, out in the open, caught on camera. It was awful. It was just an awful, awful situation. And I don't need to buttress that by saying, "Oh, I didn't really like Charlie Kirk." I don't need to do that. He's
Right.
a young man. Whatever he was saying, it wasn't something that you go and you kill somebody over. And it was an awful thing to do. But naturally, that there's that tendency among some people to either take it and expand the blame to others, or you have it on the other side where we've seen photos of people wearing bloody shirts or something like that, problem solved or something, or that teacher or something in Chicago that did the thing with the a kind of a gun to her neck. And it's just ugly. Why would you do that? And that's what I mean about how I can't get into their heads when they do this, because I could never conceive of doing something like that.
No, I agree. I think it would be really helpful. It's not like everybody takes their cues from elected leaders these days, but right is literally about 10 minutes before I turned on the program here to talk to you. Senator Mike Lee was out there saying they killed Charlie Kirk. They did this. He's particularly been bad over the past few years, but it drives me nuts that this is such political violence is a real issue. It's a serious issue, and I feel like our elected leaders really need to be more responsible about that. And it happens on both sides, but there seems to be no restraint on this stuff right now.
There's the typical calls immediately following something that says, this kind of behavior isn't tolerable, and this shouldn't happen, and violence is not the answer. Everybody comes out with the platitudes and the usual things that they say, which is kind of what you're supposed to say in those moments, but then they don't tone things down after that. Everything kind of dies down, and we bring it back up. Now, of course, nobody out there, we're talking about like Mike Lee, is not calling for violence or anything like that.
Right.
But when you're using language like they killed him, again, you're trying to concoct somewhat of a conspiratorial situation. It's kind of like when you look at Trump and the prosecutions. Now, me looking at it from as an observer, I think Letitia James' prosecutions of the Trump organization as Attorney General were ridiculous. I think Alvin Bragg's prosecution was ridiculous. I even think the Georgia case didn't have much merit. But what that allows is it gives people the permission structure to basically say every prosecution for Donald Trump, including January 6th and the documents case, where I think they had him dead to rights, is all just part of the same conspiracy. They're out to get him. They wanted, and that's where they come with, if they could do it to me, they could do it to you. All that kind of stuff. And it just becomes part of that. And on the left, it's everything is a conspiracy. Everything is Trump is trying to do this and Brady's trying to do that. What was it? Tara Palmieri, who does the Red Letter now, struck out on her own, had a Substack chat where she kind of posted an article about how people were concerned about not having the ground game that Elon Musk funded. And I just mentioned in there that the two races in New Jersey and Virginia really didn't have much to do with the ground game, wasn't going to make much of a difference, double digit. But then all these other comments followed. And I get it, they're random people on a social media site, but still, they were all basically going on about the 2024 election and how Elon helped to rig it. And that there's no way Trump won those swing states. And again, these aren't elected officials saying this the way we saw it on the Republican side, but still, it's in people's heads. And if you're convinced that 77 million people didn't vote for Trump, then you're convinced that Elon used his, powers of persuasion and his team to kind of manipulate vote tabulations and everything like that. Then that's when you kind of you have to take a break. It's like cut it off for a little bit. What's the saying? Go touch grass.
Yes.
Go take a hike like John does all the time. He's always taking his hikes, living out in a beautiful area of Colorado. And so it's like, just get away from it all. And I talked about that in the newsletter. I don't, on the weekends and stuff, I watch things. I mentioned these things like Vice Grip Garage. Vice Grip Garage is just a guy from North Dakota. He lives in Tennessee now. He finds these old cars. He gets them back on the road. He'll have these episodes that are 2.5 hours where he, in fact, I think one of the times he was out in Colorado getting an old 1950 Chevy. He was going to drive it 1,800 miles home.
Nice.
This thing hadn't been started in 25 years. Stuff like that. My wife and I like watching cooking shows, competitions. It's
I saw you working on your porch too. It looked like it went pretty well, pretty seamlessly.
I did. I rebuilt my deck this past spring. It was when we bought the house, we noticed that some of the deck boards were starting to rot. And then I was getting to a point where I was like, okay, this is like starting to get dangerous here. And it looks ugly. I'm gonna tear it down. I'm gonna rebuild it. I've never done it before in my life. I had done some woodworking stuff, so I had some basic knowledge of things, but I'm like, yeah, I can do this. And I did. So it's stuff like that. Now I like to tinker in the garage with cars and do so much stuff to do that you can make light of, that you can just kind of step away from politics for a day or two and not even think about it.
Absolutely. I think compartmentalization is such a good thing and such a healthy thing. And that was good advice you gave in your newsletter. I wanted to talk also about something else you recently wrote about, government restraint. This is something I think we've been seeing less and less of in this country. Can you talk about that piece and some of the government overreach that you've been concerned with in recent years?
Yeah, well, it's not recent years, and now we're having this fight now over the legislative filibuster, which is the culmination of all of this. In fact, I have a feature coming out in the Washington Examiner magazine this week about that. But what I wrote in the newsletter, I'm a big fan of Burke, and Burke often talked about restraint along with liberty, restraint on the part of the government, and there's a mindset that says administrations should do whatever they want, and as long as the Supreme Court comes in and says, well, that's okay or that's not okay, that's what you're supposed to do. But that's not how our system is supposed to operate. It's not supposed to be a situation where you say, well, what did the Supreme Court say about it? Well, then it's okay. Because if you sit there and say, you look at Citizens United, how many people are going to sit there and say, well, it's okay now because the Supreme Court said it was? No, a lot of people hate that decision. I hated the fact that George W. Bush signed that law. I think if there was any impeachable offense that George W. Bush committed, it was signing the McCain-Feingold campaign finance reform bill, saying specifically there were constitutional issues with it, and he signed it anyway because he said, I'll let the court handle it. Well, it happened. The court did handle it. Now you have Citizens United. It took a lot of power away from parties to kind of have more control over the candidates they choose. But the restraint part too was more about these roles in doing things that you shouldn't be doing. And I referenced Barack Obama, and this is where people start accusing me of blaming somebody. It's not about blame. It's just simply a matter of these things start in motion. Nobody's actually to blame. It's just a situation where it happens, but as it's like a snowball, it's just going to keep getting worse. There's always going to be the next person that is going to try to outdo the other. And partisans are going to argue over, well, this is good, so it's okay, whereas this is bad, so it's not. But when President Obama said for years he could not enact DACA on his own, he said, I'm not a king, I don't have those powers, Congress has to do this. And he did it anyway. And then not only did he do it, but then he further boasted about his possible abilities to do that, where he said, if Congress won't act, I will. I have a pen and a phone. And clearly that gave much more of a permission structure for Trump. Probably would have done it anyway. It's not like he's going to sit there and say, well, Obama did this, so I guess it's okay for me. I guess it's okay for me, but it clearly gave him freedom to actually do it more. And then Biden came in. I referenced the story that, my name just blanked.
With are you talking about the student debt stuff?
No, a story that Sarah
Isger.
Sarah Isger from the Dispatch wrote about Joe Biden's what she called his lawlessness. And you can argue, well, it's not bad. He wanted to relieve student debt, right? But he doesn't have the authority to appropriate $500 billion on his own. He went when the rent moratorium was extended one last time. Justice Kavanaugh said, if this is going to happen again, it has to happen through Congress. Biden said, I'm doing it anyway. Did it anyway. He tried to ban the export of liquefied natural gas. Court said, no, you don't have the authority to do that. All of these things, it happens. All this stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum. So it didn't start happening with one president. Nobody else is to blame. Nobody can sit there and say, well, I did this, I did that. It's the idea that presidents are frustrated with Congress, and rightfully so, because everything has become so partisan. When the infrastructure bill passed, there were 10 Republicans, I think, in the House who voted for it. And Marjorie Taylor Greene went on Twitter or X or whatever it was and called them traitors because they voted for a bill that would probably assist with projects and stuff in their districts, which is why you there in Congress. You have a district you're representing. If you think that a bill is going to do well for the people in the area of your district, then go ahead and vote for it. It doesn't matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat. If the legislation is bad, then it shouldn't matter if it's a Republican or Democrat either. I'm not saying, I'm just preaching to the choir here, and even the audience knows exactly what I'm talking about. But it's kind of a situation where until Congress actually reverts back to being the superior branch of government, the co-equal thing is an entire myth, and anybody can just go follow Jay Cost on Twitter, and he'll educate you very quickly on why Congress is a superior branch of government amongst all three, to take back the reins of power and start acting like the people in Article 1 who have more of the power over the executive branch and over the judiciary to do their role. And you might start seeing a lot less of this. But unfortunately, they've decided to release a lot of that power to the executive branch, and those people in office are just going to continue to try and take advantage of it. And with the attitude, we'll just see what the courts say, because Congress isn't going to stop them.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I mean we sort of forget this at times, but there are serious legislators in Congress. We're used to seeing people out on cable news and just saying crazy stuff or filming themselves saying crazy things. But one person I felt really bad for, I think it was last year. Yeah, Senator James Langford. He spent all this time coming up with this comprehensive immigration bill. Everybody seemed to really like it, and then Trump says, "Well, this could help my chances of winning, of coming back to office." So they didn't only just shut it down; they went off on Langford. He was actually, I think, censured by the Republican
Yeah,
Party in the
Republican
state.
Party, and yeah.
It it's just you're right. I mean, it's great that you bring out the point about the co-equal branches that aren't really co-equal. Congress is supposed to be the most powerful, and I feel like it's completely dysfunctional. The executive branch is going way past where it should, and I think really the only legitimately well working branch is the judicial right now, and they're just getting there's so much on their plate right now that they're having to
Right.
kind of deal with all this mess, and it's completely just not working.
Yeah, but that's the point. They shouldn't have all of these things that they have to resolve. And of course, it comes down to how are they going to decide is also going to determine how people react. And it's interesting. I was actually listening to the oral arguments about the tariffs yesterday, and the more conservative justices were not having it what the Solicitor General was giving them. In fact, I said this on Twitter. Justice Gorsuch was clearly losing his patience with the Solicitor General. I'm not sure I can't remember his name, but injected several lines of sarcasm in order to avoid, I think, just like blasting the guy. And even Thomas and Alito were going after him on the text, basically the textual part of the law, to kind of challenge him. Where in the text does it say this, and how are you able to do this? And so it was bad. And I said, but the thing that's really important to watch is the three liberal justices who clearly didn't seem to be on the side of the administration. I said, but it's kind of a big change from 3 years ago when they ruled in favor of Biden being able to appropriate $500 billion. And you want to think that they're doing it via legal means and not necessarily political. And I think Elena Kagan is probably one of the smartest members of the court. But that's the problem. You get these decisions because the court shouldn't have to take this up to begin with. If Congress would exercise its power, sit there and say, no, Mr. President, you can't do this. Here's a law. We're going to pass it. Even if you veto it, we're going to override it. And it's done. That's it. Now you don't need the courts involved. And that's what I would like to see Congress do. Unfortunately, we know that Congress is happy to exert its authority when there's another party sitting in the Oval Office. And when it switches, suddenly they're just deferential to say, yeah, we're going to do this. And bills, you talk about how it's dysfunctional. Bills used to go through, introduce on the House floor, go to a committee, they'd have hearings, they'd vote it out of committee. Now the House Speaker could just basically take a bill that gets written and introduced and throw it down on the House floor and say, let's go, let's vote. Just like that. Yeah. And it happens often. It happened when Pelosi was in office. It happened before that. It's simply the function of government. The whole idea of regular order, you hear this term a lot, is gone. And it's an unfortunate situation. And I'm an eternal optimist, so hopefully it turns back around, but I don't know. Maybe I'll be dead before it happens.
Hopefully not. You mentioned earlier the filibuster. As of the time we're recording this, it should go out either today or tomorrow, but the government is still shut down. And President Trump has been calling for the Republican-led Senate to abolish the filibuster to get things moving again. This is one of those issues, like you talked about just now, that it seems to find some party support based on which party is in the majority and which party is in the minority. You said you're writing a piece on this topic. I'm going to guess, based on your thoughts about government restraint, I'm going to guess you're very much against the filibuster, correct? Or I mean, back opposite. I'm against abolishing the filibuster.
Yes, very much so. And I find the reasoning for Trump and his supporters saying, if we don't do it now, Democrats are going to do it anyway, so we might as well do it because they're going to do it, so we can just do what we want to do. And Democrats tried in 2022, and Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin led the fight. Now, Everybody says it didn't pass because those two voted against it, but you know how this works. There are other Democrats in the party I think would not want it to happen either, but they knew it was going to fail because of
Right.
Sinema's and Manchin's public display of saying we're not going to let this go. So it's safe for them to vote yes, we'll do it here because it's not going to happen. I said I referenced somebody who, Ron Paul was former representative, was famous for voting against budgets, always talking about we're spending too much, we're spending too much. But he was always very good at making sure he inserted lots of money that would go to projects in his district and then brag about how he voted against it. Easy to do. And it happens all the time. There's show votes. So I still don't think it would happen even without Sinema and Manchin there. And we talked before about, people who are still in Congress doing good things, and the word institutionalist comes up quite a bit. And John Thune, thankfully, is an institutionalist. He's basically taking the lead from Mitch McConnell, who's also an institutionalist. And even John Cornyn is. So, but of course, you have the loudmouths, who are going to be out there talking about it. Bernie Moreno, who's already out there saying abolish it. Tommy Tuberville, who sometimes convinced, I don't know how that man managed to coach a college football team successfully, but he's one. And Josh Hawley is another. It's the excuse to sit there and say, well, Democrats are going to do it anyway, so we might as well just go ahead and do it. I really have my concerns about that and Mitch McConnell warned about it in 2021 when they were considering it. He had a House floor speech and he said, you guys go ahead and do this. He goes, I've warned you in the past about stuff like this. And that goes back to the nuclear option on judicial nominees. So I've warned you, because if you do it, get ready for it. There's going to be carry reciprocity across all 50 states, including Washington, D.C. There's going to be the kind of strictest border control that you ever saw. We're going to pass pro-life legislation. He just rattled off a list of things that Republicans could pass with a Republican in the White House with only 51 votes if they went through and they broke it. So I'm hoping that Thune and Cornyn and the others who are opposed to it kind of hold the line, and this will just be more bluster like it was from his first term. And if it happens at some point, then we'll wait for the fallout. But this whole idea that it's bad for democracy, it really isn't. I don't want the Senate turned into a mini version of the House. Then what's the point of having the two chambers? You might as well just, put it all together as one. If everything is going to pass, if you're in a situation where 50.1% of everything that's done is what you want, at some point you're going to be on the other end of that. You're going to be in that 49.9 or 50.1 and 49.9. So, be careful what you wish for is the best thing to say about that.
Yeah. No, just on a silly side note, did you happen to see, you brought up John Thune. Did you happen to see that video of him the other day where he was very angry and animated?
No, I did not.
Okay. It was kind of scary. It was kind of scary to me because John Thune, I've met John Thune, and I'm familiar with him, and he's like the calmest person I've ever seen. He seems like he barely has a pulse, and he's this large dude, and he got so animated. He was going off about something, and it was really, really unsettling to me, Jay.
Oh, I'm gonna have to watch that now.
Yeah, look it up.
Because he's one of those guys that's just like straight laced. He's either smiling or just has a serious face, and he talks, and it's just very easygoing, very calm. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see that.
It was like Frankenstein's monster had broken loose. It was really, really fascinating. But yeah, I just doesn't have anything to do with anything. I just thought it was amusing. But I was going to ask you, last topic I was going to ask you about. So there has been a big blow up on the political right lately related to anti-Semitism. Tucker Carlson is a big part of it, though the matter certainly isn't limited to him. This all really took off, I think, after the Charlie Kirk assassination. So some big names on the right decided that the left was such an existential threat that they were, calling on fellow righties to embrace even the most radical right wingers out there, bigots and extremists, basically, in a move of solidarity, I guess, to defeat the left. Then there was that Young Republicans chat room controversy, which exposed a lot of this nasty stuff, that surprised people that was sort of already going on in Republican establishment circles. Next, we had Tucker Carlson, who has become increasingly anti-Jew. He platformed Nick Fuentes, who basically self-identifies as a Nazi, and treated him with kid gloves in this interview. And then the last part of this so far is that the Heritage Foundation came under fire for its close relationship with Tucker after this incident. And Kevin Roberts, the president of Heritage, really seems to keep blowing every opportunity to effectively distance the organization from those elements, in large part, I think, because I don't know if it's just an enduring loyalty to Tucker, or if there's some sort of business loyalty going on with Tucker. I don't really get it, but it's odd to me because after October 7th, we found out just how serious the problem with anti-Semitism on the left was, and it seems we do have like a legitimate problem on the right. What do you make of all of this?
Yeah, it's an unfortunate situation, because it's like you would think it would be pretty easy to sit there and say, you know what, maybe we shouldn't be platforming a guy like Nick Fuentes. I've met Fuentes. I didn't know it was him when I met him. It was funny. It was just back at some.
Did you have dinner with him, Jay? Were you?
No, I did not have dinner with him.
Okay.
We were at a political conference called Politicon. This is back, I think, somewhere in Nashville. I can't remember the year. And he came over, and I didn't know it was him, and he was saying something, and somebody I was with said, "Oh, that's Nick Fuentes." And I'm like, "That's Nick Fuentes?" He's like 5'1", and just this tiny little guy walking around with other tiny little nerds. And I was like, okay, but whatever. Here's the thing. Typically, there's always going to be people like that guy around. They've been around for years and years, and they just didn't have the internet to be able to do it. Back when the internet was still new, these kooks would create these like crazy GeoCities websites with nothing but stars in the background, talking about how the Jews were taking over everything. The problem here is, and it's not so much that Tucker had him on, but that's a problem. But the fact that he didn't challenge him on nearly anything, like if he would have given half the treatment he gave to Ted Cruz when Cruz was on talking about Israel that he did to Nick Fuentes, it might have been something a little bit more interesting. But he just sat there and just kind of nodded along at all the stupidity, and Kevin Roberts, just that mealy mouth kind of thing, where it's like it was just odd. It was like, fine, you want to sit there and defend Tucker Carlson, but you can sit there and you don't have to be so nice about Nick Fuentes. John, I'm just like at a point where it's like, why are we even having this debate? If you go back to William F. Buckley, he wanted the Birchers out of the conservative movement and said these people are kooks. So why is there even a debate about it? And people talking about, the circular firing squad. Circular firing squad? What are you talking about? We're not talking about people who are even if you talk about somebody like Josh Hawley, who's the nationalist right, almost in terms of policy, almost like Bernie Sanders like in what they want to do economically, but culturally very far to the right. But that's a situation. It's not even something like that. We're talking about people who have an affinity for Nazis and hate Jews and are bigots, out in the open bigots. It's kind of like a thing where it's just like you shake your head and say, why are we having this conversation? This should be easy. This is a gimme. This is the best field goal kicker in the NFL, kicking a chip shot from 17 yards out. So why is there a debate? Why should there be a debate about what we should do? Or, and the whole idea, people have free speech, you don't have to cancel them. Nobody's talking about canceling Tucker Carlson. No one's talking about him getting removed from whatever platform he has. He can do whatever he wants. Nick Fuentes, no one's talking about, but why do you have to sit there and even give it any attention? Just don't. And this whole idea that you need these people as part of your coalition to continue winning, that's insanity. If you look at Tuesday's elections, and I look at the exit polls, 7%, and this is in Virginia and New Jersey, 7% of people who voted for Abigail Spanberger in Virginia, and say her name Mikey, is that how it is, or Mickey, or is it Mickey? I don't even know.
I'm not
Mickey,
sure.
Mikey, Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey. in each state, 7% of the people who voted for them voted for Trump in 2024. That is not an insignificant number. Now, I don't think it would have changed the election results because they're like double digits.
Right.
But if you start spreading that out to states like Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Nevada, where the margins were thin, or even Georgia, that is going to, those are the people you want to have in your coalition. The people who decided, I voted for you last time, but now I'm going to vote for these guys. Who cares if some online little dweeb, basement dwelling, Call of Duty playing punks are going to get upset because you tell Nick Fuentes to take a hike? Who cares? And if you're going to go out there and you're going to sit there and sound like, oh, we believe in robust faith, give me a break. There's certain things you don't have to debate. I am not going to sit there and say, you know what, we actually should debate the merits of or the existence of the Holocaust. No, I'm not. I'm not going to debate the merits of it. It's like, I'm not going to debate the merits of the moon landing. I'm not going to debate the merits of the Lincoln or the Kennedy assassination. This is all done. These debates are over. So there's no point in moving. There's no point in continuing to do it. It's just stupid. It's just stupid. If you really think that maintaining these people as part of your coalition is what's going to prevent you from it's will keep you from losing, then don't be surprised in 2026 when there's another blue wave. And what are you going to do? Say, oh, it's because of all the infighting.
They will.
I think somebody, they will. I think there
that.
was a poll that said there was something more than half the country has never even heard of Nick Fuentes.
Right. Yeah, what gets me, and it's this is sort of tragically amusing to me in all of this, is that the people who are calling for, or at least excusing the idea of making nice with anti-Semites in order to stand together, against the left. They don't actually want people like near you on their team. We're pretty normie, Trump critical conservatives who have no love for the left. But all people like you and I have heard for years is, from today's right is, good riddance, Rhino, go vote for Kamala, all this stuff. But suddenly they want to unite with the crazy radicals, the bigots, the Nazi. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't know if it's a sincere effort or if it's just something that a lot of these influencers are using to maybe get some attention. It's the whole thing. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, well, a lot of it is clout and money driven. If you can say things like, I think some guy Aaron something or whatever that writes for the Blaze, saying, conservatives are busy attacking other conservatives over leaked chat messages and interviews. The Democrats were going on to see blah 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 blah. They're the party of winners. We're just a bunch of happy losers. And it's like, do you really think that was the issue? Do you really think that you lost an election by 14 points or whatever it was in Virginia because people were debating the merits of whether or not we should sit there and hold on to anti-Semites as part of a coalition? Come on. Somebody asked a good question. What has Tucker Carlson done to get out the vote? So it's like,
right.
Good question, right?
He's done some things for fundraising, maybe for heritage, maybe, but not for getting out the vote, I don't think.
Right. And not even fundraising. Basically, they bought ad time on his show. Right. So, it's one of those things where you have trouble kind of putting it into words because it's all just so stupid. These are debates that you just wouldn't have had so long ago. And then you think about conservative icons who would just sit there and say, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? We're at the point now where, Pat Buchanan is looking like a moderate compared to some of these people, in terms of their views about Israel and everything like that. Even he would probably be like, whoa, we're going a little bit too far here. Maybe we should take a step back.
I saw Matt Walsh out there the other day make some comment about, no one's been vindicated as strongly as Pat Buchanan has. What are you talking about? But it's funny how people just the rewriting of history and the none of it. Yeah, it's painful to even talk about. But
right, you have to laugh at it. It's kind of old adage. You laugh to avoid crying. It's. It's about all you can do. Laugh, shake your head, and be like, what is going on here? What how did we
Yeah,
get here? Yeah.
yeah, it's wild. Well, Jay, you've been very charitable with your time. I appreciate it. I want to thank you for coming on the Daily Express. It was great talking to you. We never actually,
Yeah.
well, we talked a long time ago on that other podcast, which I did enjoy. It was just, it was awkward. You guys did have your shirts on. I want to make sure that's clear. That was just a joke I was doing. But I really recommend that people check out your Substack, the Monday Notice. I'll link to it in the show notes. But yeah, I always enjoy reading it. I'm glad you brought it back. I know it was probably hard with some of the other stuff you were working on to maintain that, but you're back in full force now, and it's great to see. And I just want to thank you for coming on again.
No, I appreciate it, John. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Well, thanks a lot, Jay, and you have a great day.